I've never posted here before or felt compelled to tell anyone my story. I came across the Three Kings on the front page of Reddit last night and thought I would give it a try, especially after reading the post that it could be explained partially through a scientific method of being psychological. Here is what went on last night. I read the post around 7:30 last night and thought it sounded like a very fun experiment. I texted my brother-in-law to come over and to bring his big mirror off his dresser. He asked why. I told him to check out the top post over on No Sleep, and he immediately called me. The Three Kings thing? He said. Yep, sounded like something we could get a kick out of, I replied. Then went on to explain the face in the mirror study and how I thought this would be one hell of a good time. I really should have taken things more seriously, I suppose, but as they say, hindsight is best sight. He showed up around 9 with his mirror and a large pillar candle. I already had my basement set up the rest of the way. 3 recliners, one brown facing north, one green facing east, one purple facing west. I propped up the mirrors in the east and west facing chairs, set up a pedestal fan on low, directly behind my north facing throne, placed a bucket of water directly between the east and west facing chairs, and placed another bucket upside down directly in front of the throne to put the candle at a height that my body would block the fan from blowing it out. We went back upstairs, making very sure to leave the basement door open, and sat down to play a little TF2. Around midnight, I told him I would be stretching out for a bit and that if he heard my alarm go off and I did not wake up, to come shake me. 3:30 came faster last night than on any night before. I swear I had barely plugged my phone in and shut my eyes before I was out. I dreamed very vividly during those 3.5 hours. I was riding in the back of an ambulance and let out in front of a large building made completely of glass. I stepped out, and the man that had opened the door simply said, "Go now." I ran to the building, and the door opened as I approached. Looking across the building, I could see what can only be called a werewolf being let in the other side. In my dream state, I attempted to go back the way I came in to no avail, and began running upwards to try and escape. Many times, only a glass wall separating me from the werewolf on the other side. The dream had no end. I simply woke up to my alarm at 3:30, grabbed my fully charged cell, a lighter, the candle, and a small cedar keepsake box, my power item, and headed from my room to the basement. "You ready for this?" asked my brother-in-law. "Absolutely," I replied. "Remember, do not touch me. Yell first, then lights, then call me, then the bucket. Got it?" "Yep," he replied, and went back to TF2. I lit the candle and headed down into the dark basement, closing the door behind me. The only sound was the soft whir of the fan as I went to the chair. I checked my phone one last time. 3:32. Perfect. I sat down, placed my candle on the bucket ahead of me, lighter in my left pocket, cell phone in my right, my cedar box situated between my knees, and stared off into the distance beyond the mirrors. It was very quiet. That was the first thing I noticed. The fan seemed to have quieted to nothing, and the basement was silent as death. "Here," I heard something whisper from the left. I almost turned and reminded myself that I was not to look at the mirrors. "Here," again. "Here. It's over here." More and more insistent each time. "Look over here." The voice was so demanding, it sent chills through my entire body. "No," I replied simply, surprised at how small and weak my voice sounded. "No, I will not look up. Stop asking." "Good," from the right this time. "You are always so dutiful, but why have you given up trying?" I felt a weight press on my right knee, almost as if someone placed a hand there. It was immediately gone. I see in my peripheral vision the mirror on the right almost rippling like water. The mirror on the left seems to be spiraling inward with movement. "You never listen," from the left. "That's why these things happen. You never learned to listen. That's why I've come for you." More and more aggressively. "There are no second chances. There are no other options. You will pay for it, and you will pay what I want to take." From the right. "There is no reason not to pay back what is owed to him. Give him what he wants. Just take a glance." "No." I gripped my box tighter. "What is this?" I asked. "What am I hearing?" From the left. "Judgment." From the right. "Fate." In unison. "You should have just let him catch you and be done with it." The dream immediately came back to my mind. "It was only a dream," I whispered. "Just like this." "This is no dream, fool," came the voice from the left. "You were never good at entertaining new ideas, fool," came the voice from the right. "Now accept what is happening." A splash of cold water awoke me from whatever it was going around on me. I looked up from the floor to see my brother-in-law standing over me with an empty bucket, lights on fully above me. "What the hell, man? I called you 5 times before I turned on the lights and stood here yelling before I soaked you. What the hell, man?" I don't know," I replied, looking down at my cell to see the missed calls, all at 4:34, 4:34, 4:34, 4:34. I really have no idea. It was 4:35. So, I'm new to this whole Redditing thing here, but I'm a big fan of creepypastas. I listen to CreepsMcPasta and Mr. Creepypasta mostly, and I know most of the stuff is fake. But when I heard about 3 Kings, I just had to try it, even if it was just for the lulz factor. Now, before I go any further, let me introduce myself a little. I'm an atheist, have been since I was 13, and haven't gone to church since I was little. I don't take stock in any of this paranormal stuff either. I just consider it another fun avenue in which we can all spook ourselves. But ever since I tried this 3 Kings thing, I'm not sure where I stand. I did this experiment at my girlfriend's house. She has a dance room right outside her room with a mirror wall, thankfully, positioned on the south wall, while the wall towards the north was blank. We spent the evening setting up the dance room, watched a nice movie afterwards, and then went to bed in a guest room downstairs. She was very clear about how she didn't want to be sleeping in the room next to the supernatural stuff. Now, after this point, it'll get a bit hard to believe for some of you, especially because none of you guys seem like the religious type. Blood magic, demons, cleansing rituals, tarot cards, etc. So, 3:30. I wake up to the sound of Weird Al playing poker music. I figured it'd be best to go into this smiling. Me and my girl go upstairs, and she waits outside while I go in and take my seat, with the lit candle of course. The room's longer than it is wide, and with a seat at the back, it was impossible to see the door through all the black. After a few minutes of nothing happening, I hear something from the darkness towards the door. It's faint singing in a language I can't understand, and the blackness turns into a mass of shadows that look like people. They're all marching from the right to the left, like they're on a parade, and as they pass, I can't help but feel elated. After a couple of minutes of this going on, I noticed a second noise. From the chair to my right was the sound of someone writing something down. It was a scratchy sound too, like someone using one of those dull quill pens. God, I love those things. I wanted to ask what it was writing down, but I was too afraid of the answer to go through with it, especially when the room was full of moving shadows, even if they did look like they were rejoicing. The scribbling on my right ceased, and then a voice from the chair on my left spoke up. It said my name, and then started listing off every good deed I'd done in my life. Big, small, valiant, accidental, all of them. Even ones I'd done when I was a little boy and forgotten about. And as the voice listed these things off, the writing on my right resumed. In case anyone's wondering why I've been gender neutral about the voice, it's because I couldn't tell what gender it was. Like every nanosecond, it was switching between male and female. The tone was somewhat soothing, but the constant switching still gave me something of a migraine by the time this was all over. After it got through listing all the good deeds, it went over all the shameful things I've done in the past as well. Each one that went by made me feel pretty bad. Even small things like when I was 5 and stole a chocolate bar from my sister's Halloween candy. The thing on my right was still keeping track, or at least I assumed that's what it was doing. And I felt like I wanted to grab whatever it was writing in and rip out the pages. Didn't though, because every other sense in my brain was telling me that it was a terrible, terrible idea. After it finished listing everything, it started speaking to me directly. Like, you know how a guidance counselor in high school talks to someone about how to fix their grades or get into a college? It kind of did that. It encouraged me to stay off drugs and alcohol, except for when it's absolutely necessary for either. Told that I didn't mind if I skipped church on Sundays, as long as I did more charity work. And it told me to call my parents more often, they've been worried sick about how I've been doing. When my girlfriend called for me, both voices said goodbye. The shadows and music faded away, and I heard the chairs scrape against the wood floor. My girlfriend came in, asked how I was, and then went back to bed. Didn't tell her exactly what happened because saying, "I think God just told me to straighten up," in the South can lead to bad things. So, what the hell just happened? Did I talk to God? Am I nuts? Maybe it was a pair of spirits, demons, supernatural beings, playing some sort of prank on me. I don't know what to believe after this. Also, should I have the house cleansed, exorcised, washed? I'm not sure if I should do that after every supernatural experience, or just when something doesn't go right. I'm warning you all now, this is going to be long. Also, as an avid reader and writer, I'm going to use my vocabulary to the best of my abilities below. I just want it to be something readable. This isn't meant to be a way to get karma. It is a self-post after all, so I will get nothing other than the satisfaction of knowing I communicated my experience well. So, late night, around 6:30, I went out and bought a fan, because we didn't have one. It took a while, because apparently most stores don't sell fans in the middle of winter. Who knew? Anyway, we did eventually get one. We also bought a nice, thick candle, so I wouldn't burn my hand from dripping wax. I should probably clarify who we is. My girlfriend stayed over to help perform this ritual, as well as one of my best friends. They helped me out a lot and really came through when I needed them. So my girlfriend and I, we got back to my house around 9. We were at the mall, she wanted to do a little bit of shopping while we were there. We decided that having another friend over would be a good idea. So I convinced my best bud to come help us out. It didn't take much convincing because I told him of my predicament earlier in the week and told him I would likely be performing the 3 Kings ritual. He said he would be over as soon as he could. So, while we were waiting for my buddy to show, we started getting set up. It took a while to cover all of the windows in the basement and get the mirrors and chairs set up, but we finished it around 11:30. We taped garbage bags over the windows so no light would get in, which took really long. Anyway, we set everything up, turned on the fan, and were about to go upstairs. I got a really strange feeling about this, so I quickly set up a salt circle around my throne. I was sure to leave it open so that I could step in later, and quickly close it up. We then went upstairs, left the door open, and waited. My friend showed up around 12, and we all made sure we were on the same page. We made plans so that if things hit the fan, we wouldn't be scrambling to get out. I then told my friend he could either sleep in my brother's room, which is upstairs next to mine, or he could crash on the main floor somewhere. He decided he would sleep on my couch in the front room of the house, which is fairly far away from the basement entrance. We finalized everything, turned off all the lights, and tried to go to bed. Sleeping didn't go as planned. My heart was racing, and it took all my meditative skills to calm myself down. Unfortunately, I'm pretty new to meditation, so it didn't work as well as I would have liked. My friend too was having issues. He texted me saying he was hearing noises and that he was getting a little nervous. I attributed this to us mostly hanging at his house, so he was likely not familiar with the sounds my house makes at night. I must have been wrong, because he texted me he was going to go out to his car for a bit to compose himself, because he thought he was hearing whispers coming from the basement. One thing you should know about my friend is that he's a brave guy. He's not the kind of person to peace out when the situation looks grim. However, he later told me that his sense of fear developing in him was something new that he had never felt before. He described it as strange and alien. So he went out to his car, read for a bit, and then came back in right at 3:30 as I was going downstairs. The alarm went off at 3:30 exact. I must have fallen asleep at some point because I woke up, hopped out of bed, and quickly got ready. I wore the rosary my girlfriend gave me as added protection, hoping it would help out. I grabbed my power object, my Game Boy Color, favourite thing as a kid, lit the candle, and made sure I had my fully charged phone, and headed downstairs. At the top of the basement steps, my loved ones wished me luck and told me they would be here for me. The door was still open, and I could hear the fan running, so I went down. Those of you who haven't done this, something that is really important to remember is that 3 minutes isn't a lot of time to get your stuff together. As I was going downstairs, still half asleep, I remember thinking to myself, do I really want to do this? Am I ready for this? Well, I can tell you, I probably wasn't, but I needed to get this whole conundrum sorted out. So, I went on down. I sat down, made sure I had everything I needed, and checked my phone. It read 3:32. I then remembered to close the salt circle, chastising myself for almost forgetting something so simple. One thing I can tell you is that you quickly lose track of time down there. At first, it seemed like nothing was happening, and I was alone in my big, dark basement. I was nervous, but other than that, surprisingly okay. Pretty quickly, I started to get disappointed because I figured nothing was going to happen, and that I was about to lose a night's sleep for nothing. Boy, was I ever wrong. Suddenly, the candle I had started flickering. I'm not talking about a little bit either. I was legitimately getting scared it was going to go out. It looked like it was dancing around. I was casting strange shadows all around me. It was at this point I could feel the atmosphere changing. I was still in my basement, but it was completely different. My eyelids started getting heavy, and I was having a tough time staying grounded in reality. In my peripheral vision, I could start to see what looked like movement from both mirrors, and the light from the candle was dancing in my eyes. At this point, I was excited and terrified. I could barely muster the courage to speak up, but eventually, I did. "Am I still alone?" I asked. My voice sounded far off, and didn't sound nearly as confident as I imagined it would. I sounded very timid, but at least it wasn't a whimper. Immediately after speaking, I felt two distinct mental presences crash into me. From the left, I felt an overwhelming sense of anger, depression, hate, and what generally felt like evil incarnate. From the right came these feelings of happiness, joy, and kindness, and was the complete opposite of the opposing force. It felt like I was no longer one person, but instead 3 entities fighting it out inside of my body. I remember feeling squished inside my own body, and I was starting to shake. It was like nothing I'd ever felt before. I, at one point, was sure I was going to be pushed out of my own body, and could feel what can only be described as ego death. I was no longer seeing with my own eyes at this point, and I was now having a vision. Perhaps this was a dream of some point. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but one thing I knew for sure was that I was no longer consciously aware of my surroundings. In my vision, I saw 2 people standing apart facing one another. One was the dark creature from my dreams, except that now it was wielding a 2-handed sword. This weapon had an aura of darkness and was curved back and forth. It looked like the kind of weapon that would tear a person to shreds painfully. The man standing opposite of this beast looked like a knight. He was decked out in a suit of white armor and had a gold sigil that looked like the cross imposed on top of the Buddhist wheel. His weapon was a straight white sword and glowed faintly. They were standing about 10 feet away from each other in a field surrounded by a blood-red sky. They then started talking, but not to each other. They were each asking for my support in the battle. The beast told me he would crush my enemies beneath my feet, and that I would never again be alone in the darkness. I would never again know pain, because no one would ever be able to hurt me again. He promised power and prestige in exchange for my aid. The knight told me he would watch over me and protect me from evil. He said that pain was a part of living, and that as long as I could learn to forgive, that pain would not matter, nor would I have enemies. He claimed he could help me solve my own problems. He would teach me to live truly and would bring me to enlightenment. I was completely overwhelmed at this point. The 2 beings started fighting, and I didn't know what to do. Every time their swords clashed, it felt like the sound was resonating inside of me. I'm not going to lie, at this point, I was terrified. I didn't know what to do, and I definitely wasn't ready for this. Not too long into the fight, it seemed like the beast was getting the upper hand. As my terror grew, he started to move faster and struck harder. The knight was starting to lose ground and was stumbling backwards, protecting himself. The knight was pleading with me to aid him, or he would fail. Before I could respond, the beast knocked him to the ground and disarmed him. As the beast reared back to end the man, I decided quickly that I couldn't let this thing win. I don't know how to describe it. I felt like my emotions just poured out to this man in support. As the dark sword was arching down, a shield appeared on the knight's outstretched arm and deflected the blow easily. The knight was quickly back up and bashed the beast back with his new shield. The creature seemed to fall back easily, cursing both the knight and I. The knight's sword seemed to quickly fly back into his hand just as he was advancing to slay the beast. He swung down hard and smashed the beast's sword into pieces. The creature fell to the ground, wounded. The knight stepped over the creature and put the sword to its neck. "You are defeated. Crawl back to the darkness you came from, and never rear your hideous face again, or we shall obliterate you." At this point, the creature let out a hissing sound and was swallowed up by the ground. Suddenly, I was back in my body, along with this sense of pure joy and happiness. I somehow knew my dreams would no longer be filled with despair and darkness. The man's voice came from the mirror on my right and congratulated me for making the right choice. At this point in time, I looked to my right, at least I think I did, and into the mirror. He stood there, leaning on his sheathed sword. I asked him who he was. He chuckled a little bit and replied, "You still haven't figured it out? I'm you." And with that, he took off his helmet and revealed himself to be what looked like a more elegant version of me. The way the mirrors were set up, I could see the reflection of the beast from the other mirror, crawling away. It turned back for a second, and I could see what looked like a twisted, decaying form of me. Before I could ask any more questions, and believe me, I had plenty to ask, I felt a strange sensation cascading over my head. At first, I was confused, but then felt cold. Time was up. My friend and my girlfriend stood there, dumping water over my head. Apparently they called down and I did not reply. They said they could hear my phone ringing, but I did not answer. I guess when they came down they said it looked like I was in a trance and was unresponsive. My friend said it looked like my eyes were half open and were moving about rapidly and in no particular direction, just spinning all around. We went upstairs, left all the lights on, and talked the whole thing out. Anyway, I would most certainly say this ritual was well worth the effort, and I'm glad I worked up the courage to try it. It was like nothing I've ever done before, and was an awesome experience. If you guys were to ask me if it was spiritual or purely psychological, I honestly couldn't tell you. There are arguments for both sides, but I couldn't decide on one over the other. Instead of just going off what happened to me, why don't some of you try it out for yourself? I can't say it will be similar to mine, and I don't recommend it to anyone who might have a psychological break, but all I can say is that, for me, it was well worth the stress. Anyway, thanks for putting in the time to read this all and for wishing me luck, guys. Good luck to everyone who gives this a whirl.